Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Coordinating with the NIMAC, What It Means and Why It's Important. I'm Cynthia Curry. I'm Project Director of the National Center on Accessible Digital Educational Materials and Instruction. Please simply call us by the pronunciation of our acronym, and that would be NCADEMI. It's my pleasure to serve as the moderator of today's webinar. We have set up several ways that you can communicate both with the presenters and with other attendees. If your comment or question is meant for the presenters, please enter that in the Q&A. So that's where the presenters will be looking for questions that are specifically for them to address. On the other hand, please feel free to comment and share resources with other attendees in the chat. So that's sort of the catch-all place. And as people have started to do, please be sure to enter your name, your role, your location, and why you chose to attend today's webinar. Please go ahead and put that in the chat as we're getting underway. And before we end the webinar, there'll be time for live Q&A. So at that time, you'll be invited to use the React button to raise your hand and come over your microphone. And we'll also pull questions from the Q&A during that time. Captioning and ASL are both available. Simply use the caption button to turn on captioning. Our ASL interpreters have been spotlighted. If you have issues accessing either the captioning or the ASL, please message Natalie Cardenas, who should be at the top of your participant list. The slide deck and resources are readily available on our website, and the webinar recording will be posted on the same webpage tomorrow. So be looking forward to that. You'll also be getting a reminder email as whether you attended, you're here attending live, or you know folks who registered couldn't be here, they too will be getting the reminder email with the link to the recording, as well as an evaluation survey. So on to the show. Our presenters will do a round of introductions and then get right to addressing what it means to coordinate with the NIMAC and why it's important. Jenna?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenna Fallbush, and I am a technical assistant specialist with NCADEMI, and I will be the host as we move forward with our kind of question and answer with the NIMAC today. So Nicole, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Nicole Gaines. I am the NIMAC Project Director, and I'm really pleased to be able to present to you guys today.
And Liz?
Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Schaller, and I am the NIMAC Manager.
Thank you. All right, so to get our conversation fired up, we want to keep using this chat. So if you would, please reflect on your knowledge of NIMUS and the NIMAC, and consider how you'd rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 4. I see a number in there already, which is awesome. So use the chat and enter a 1 if you have no knowledge, a 2 if you're somewhat familiar, a 3 if you're experienced, and a 4 if you're an expert. I'm seeing lots of 2s and 3s, some 1s and 4s, and even a 0. So they are, really here to just learn from the ground up, which is great. We're happy you're here at all levels of knowledge. So let's kind of get into this a little deeper now. And we're going to start with this graphic to aid your understanding of NIMUS and NIMAC. So considering the critical importance of accessibility in purchasing curriculum materials, we're going to take a look here at this graphic. So at the bottom of the graphic, you're seeing that it's essential to prioritize accessibility when states or school districts are purchasing digital materials. So this ensures that those digital materials can be designed to be accessible from the beginning, and those materials then provide a foundation of accessibility for a wide range of students with disabilities. Then as we move to the top part of the graphic here, we're thinking about states and school districts as they're purchasing print materials. And at that point, we want to make sure that they leverage the NIMAC to provide accessible formats for students who require them. This is going to ensure that eligible students with disabilities have timely access to the accessible formats that they need, such as audio, digital text, and large print. We will be learning more about NIMUS files here in just a little while. All right, so As I've been talking about the importance of including accessibility in your purchasing decisions with that previous graphic, we want to ask you to mark your calendars for May 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern for NCADEMI's next 45-minute webinar. And this webinar is titled Including Accessibility in Your EdTech Decisions. So registration is now open and a link has been shared in the chat. If you want to grab that and save it for later, we'd love to have you join us. So diving even deeper here into today's discussion and the reason that you're all here to hear from Nicole and Liz from the NIMAC. Liz, I think you're going to kick us off. Can you please tell us more about the NIMAC?
Yes, thanks, Jenna. So I will get us started. We have kind of two key acronyms today, and it can be a little hard to distinguish between the two if you're not familiar with the NIMAC. So the NIMAC stands for National Instructional Materials Access Center, so C for center. And then later we will also touch on NIMAS, which is the file format, and it has S for standard at the end. So that's how you can kind of tell the two apart. The NIMAC was created by IDEA 2004, and it serves as the national source file repository for K-12 textbooks and instructional materials. We at the NIMAC receive digital files in the NIMAS file format from publishers, and we review those, certify them, and make them available for our users to download in order to produce accessible formats like Braille and large print and digital text on behalf of eligible students. The ultimate goal of NIMAS and the NIMAC, why they were created, is to better support timely delivery of accessible formats to students by preventing delays at the start of accessible format production. Prior to the NIMAC coming into existence, the burden fell on individual states and districts to obtain some sort of file from a publisher when the need for an accessible format was identified. And that could be a really lengthy process and just add to the overall timeline for producing accessible formats. So by having this centralized repository of source files that can be used to produce any accessible format that's needed, we hope to alleviate that kind of start time for accessible format production. When an accessible media producer, and this could be a national producer like Bookshare or the American Printing House for the Blind, or it could be a local producer, maybe a prison bureau program in your state, even a transcriber, someone in a district or school, they can access the file in the NIMAC, download it from the system, and immediately begin work on production of the format that the student needs. Today, the NIMAC works with over 210 educational publishers, and we've received over 83,000 NIMAS file sets in our system. We have over 500 authorized users. I'll touch on who those folks are in a little bit, as well as accessible media producers registered across all of the states and eligible territories. And to date, NIMAC users have downloaded files for over 56,000 materials used in the first-time production of one or more accessible formats.
Awesome, thanks, Liz. So I'm hearing that the NIMAC collects files of K-12 textbooks and instructional materials provided by publishers in this special format that you mentioned called NIMAS, and that will expedite the delivery of these formats to eligible students.
That is correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And these files then are able to be accessed at any time by registered users who can convert them, which is the really key piece here, that they do need to be converted into a usable format and an accessible format, such as Braille or digital text for our eligible students.
Exactly, yes. And then the next section will touch on a little bit more about what the file format is that the NIMAC receives, because I'm guessing if you haven't heard of the NIMAC, you've probably never heard of the word NIMAS before. It is a specialized file format, so we'll get into that. But before we do, I do want to just pause for a moment if anyone has any questions about that first chunk of information.
All right, so Liz, can you talk more about these NIMAS files?
Yeah, happy to do it. Okay, so in addition to establishing NIMAC as the central repository for files, IDEA also created the NIMAS source file format. And as Jenna mentioned, this is not a format that's distributed directly to students. Instead, it is a source file. It is an XML tagged format. So if you're familiar with like an HTML file or anything like that, it has all the tagging present and it contains the content of the book, as well as all of the images that were present in that print material. And this source file format can be ingested into a variety of software and used to produce any accessible format that's needed, Braille, large print, digital text, or digital audio. But again, the NIMAS file itself cannot be given directly to a student. It does need to be converted before it can be provided to the student.
All right, so that's helpful to know. And again, to summarize what I'm hearing, these NIMAS files themselves, again, are not actually usable and the conversion is necessary. But I think there's some more information too here about who can benefit. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So one thing that we really like to emphasize is that there is a one-to-many relationship between the NIMAS file that is downloaded and the accessible formats that can be produced from it. So one NIMAS file can be used, for instance, by Bookshare to produce a variety of digital formats that are available to eligible students. And so NIMAS files can be used to produce Braille, either hard copy or digital Braille, large print, DAISY, digital audio, EPUB, and any other digital formats that might be needed by the student. Student eligibility is another important thing that we want to touch on. So there are a wide range of students who are eligible to receive accessible formats produced from NIMAS. Students with reading disabilities such as dyslexia, students with physical disabilities, as well as students who are blind or low vision. The qualification for NIMAS points to the eligibility guidelines from the National Library Service. And so these include having either a visual impairment or a perceptual or reading disability, or are unable otherwise through a physical disability to hold or manipulate a book. So it really is a wide range of students who can receive materials produced by NIMAS. They, of course, need to also have that IEP. That's a really critical piece because, again, the NIMAC and NIMAS are part of IDEA. So you have to have that qualifying disability, and then you also have to be served under an IEP. Under IDEA 2004, states are not required to coordinate with the NIMAC, but they are required to adopt the NIMAS source file format. And that might sound a little odd, but this basically means that states have two options. They can either obtain NIMAS files directly from publishers for use in producing Braille and other accessible formats, or they can coordinate and obtain those files directly from the NIMAC. So there are two options that states have to fulfill that requirement to adopt NIMAS. And Nicole will talk a little bit more about what it means to coordinate with the NIMAC, but just so everyone knows, the NIMAC does work with all 50 states as well as the 6 eligible territories and the Department of Defense. And all of these states and eligible territories have continuously coordinated with the NIMAC for at least the past 15 years and some even earlier than that.
So something you mentioned, Liz, stuck out to me here, and that is we're talking not only about students with blindness or low vision, which from my previous experience as a technical assistance provider in Indiana, I think there was some confusion in some conversations around that. So I'm really glad that you pointed out that we are talking about students that have reading disabilities like dyslexia and how accessible formats can be something that they need as well. And as I'm talking about that, just a little note again from this experience is that I have learned and seen in person that IUP teams really need to be thoughtful when they're considering eligibility, because sometimes a student's primary eligibility might be something like autism, when in fact they have multiple disabilities, and that a reading disability can also be present at the same time, and that accessible formats could be something that the student needs to access grade level content. So it's great that we can really think of eligibility as a larger scope than just our students with blindness and low vision. All right, any questions from this section about coordinating with the NIMAC and or student eligibility? Okay, well, go ahead then, Nicole, and tell us more about what it means to coordinate with the NIMAC.
Sure. So next slide, please. So basically, when states choose to coordinate with the NIMAC, and as Liz mentioned, we are really happy that all 50 states and the eligible territories and the District of Columbia and DODEA have coordinated with the NIMAC. Basically, there are a couple of different things that are involved with this. The first is that each SEA designates a state coordinator who has the responsibility to add or remove authorized users as needed for the state. Usually that's 5 or fewer individuals because, as mentioned, these files are not distributed directly to students. They are used by authorized users or accessible media producers who are directly involved in those systems for getting materials produced and delivered to students. The second thing that happens is that they are required to require publishers in their adoption processes or purchase agreements to provide NIMAS files to the NIMAC. This is really important. It's an important piece of how IDEA set up NIMAC and NIMAS to work with states and districts. So that's really important. And then third, they agree in their coordination agreement with the NIMAC to abide by the eligibility limitations in the legislation as well as copyright in the use of the files. So under IDEA 2004, procurement and the procurement agreements of states and districts is really important. And the reason for this is because under IDEA, there is no blanket requirement for publishers to submit files to the NIMAC. So, in other words, if states and districts did not require NIMAS as a part of their adoption contracts and purchase agreements, we would have no files. This is the only mechanism to require NIMAS from publishers, are those contracts uh, with the publishers when instructional materials are procured. So including that NIMAS language in all contracts is really essential to ensuring that we have the files that are needed by students in your state. Um, Again, as Liz mentioned, what we really want to do is we want to avoid delays at the beginning of the production of accessible formats. And that's where the NIMAC is really beneficial. When the system is working as it should, we receive files in advance of an identified need so that when a need is identified, that work can begin right away without delays, without additional outreach to the publisher and asking for a source file.
So there, I mean, you said it so clearly. It is so critical to make sure that states are requiring publishers to submit NIMAS files to the NIMAC, and how I know we're going to be talking a little bit more, just about how the NIMAC really promotes that the process, right, for states and school districts, and eases the burden.
Right.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit more about that then, and why it is beneficial for states to coordinate with the NIMAC, and how you do ease that burden?
Sure. Well, basically, kind of to reiterate some of the things that Liz already shared, you know, the biggest benefit is that we have 83,000 NIMAS files available. We make those available 24/7, 365 days a year in the NIMAC online system. And This basically eliminates the need for states and districts to go individually every time an accessible format needs to be produced to ask the publisher, can you provide a source file? How long will it take? What can you provide? Um, as things were, in the days before the NIMAC existed. We want to try to alleviate that by streamlining access to those source files. The other thing that is beneficial, we again, we're really pleased that all of the SEAs that are eligible to coordinate have chosen to coordinate, and this means that at this time we have tens of thousands of NIMA source accessible materials that are available for the lifetime of the use of the instructional materials. And so basically, when it comes to coordinating with the NIMAC, it's a win for state systems for producing and delivering accessible formats, and it's a win for students.
So there's such a huge benefit in coordinating with the NIMAC. And I mean, just the fact that people, those authorized users have that 24/7, 365 access is really critical to that timely access. Does anybody have any questions about coordinating with the NIMAC or these specific benefits? All right.
I actually
Again,
have a question.
Oh yeah, okay.
Do you have data on the number of SEAs that are coordinating or states that are coordinating versus those who are just working directly with the publishers?
Basically, all of the states and eligible territories have worked with the NIMAC for many years. Consistently, most from the early days. The NIMAC itself actually began operations in late 2006 as scheduled with the department, and we have been in consistent operation since that time. And most all of the states came on board in 2007, 2008, and have also coordinated constantly since that time. So
Thank
we actually are pleased that we don't have any experience with states that are currently not opted in, or even states that have not opted, that opted in at one point and opted out and opted back in. We've had really good traction with all states since the very early days of the project.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. So, sorry, I got thrown off a little bit by the slide here, and that's okay. So can you tell us a little bit more, Liz and Nicole, about what it means for a district to opt in on the IDEA assurances?
Sure. So basically, under IDEA, districts also have the option to not work with the NIMAC. They can opt out if they choose. Obviously, for the same reasons that we encourage states to opt into the NIMAC, we strongly encourage LEAs to opt in as well. I will say that at a nuts and bolts level, a difference here is that we do not have coordination agreements with individual districts, and there's not a paperwork component to that opting in. That is something that simply happens with the IDEA assurances between the district and the state. So, but I will say that in terms of getting ensuring that LEAs are opting in, that's really critically important. And to kind of harken back a little bit in terms of the procurement, and again, the whole reason for the NIMAC is we want to have the files that are being used in schools. So while it's really important for us to have that state coordination and to be able to ensure that if to the extent that a state may be adopting state editions or any materials at the state level, that we can have those files in the NIMAC. That's important. But I think, as we all know, there's a lot of procurement, a lot of instructional materials decisions are happening at the district level. In some states, all happens at the district level, or sometimes even at the individual school level. And so when we talk about LEAs opting in, it's really important for them to choose to opt in, but also for us to ensure that they understand what that means in terms of procurement. And I would also just add that this has been an area that's been a real focus for the NIMAC in the past several years, is trying to strategize and working with NCADEMI and others to get the word out regarding the importance of procurement when it comes to NIMAS. In terms of the disadvantages to not opting in, of course, we don't want to have LEAs have the burden of going to publishers to have to individually request files. We want to be able to ensure that when the state opts in, we're able to be of benefit to all of the students in that state. So in terms of LEAs and procurement, with regard to IDEA, when an LEA chooses to opt in, they have the identical obligation as SEAs in terms of including NIMAS language in their purchase agreements and contracts with publishers. So we tend on the NIMAC side, we're not super heavy-handed. We don't like to get really legalistic, but it actually is a legal obligation under the IDEA legislation. It's not optional. It's really something that to comply with IDEA 2004, states and districts that are opting in do need to ensure that the NIMAS language is included. And it's also essential that SEAs inform LEAs of that requirement, and that district staff are aware of that obligation. One of the things that's really beneficial is that NCADEMI graciously provides a template on their website to help states and districts with this language. This is sample contract language that can literally be copied and pasted into a purchase agreement. If you happen to be someone who's been around a while, and we're involved with the National AIMS Center at CAST, a similar template was available on the AIMS Center website. I think we've made a few minor tweaks to the language recently, but basically this is available to anyone at any time to be a resource to help ensure that when you are purchasing those instructional materials, we're receiving files for those materials.
Great, thank you. And I noted or noticed in the chat that somebody was wondering about some sample language. So we do have this slide provided for you, as well as a link in the chat that Cynthia posted. So there are some resources regarding an answer to that question. And there was another question here that I thought we'd go ahead and answer right now, or I would pose. So Nicole or Liz, Joanne asked, as a school district administrator, does this mean NIMAC works directly with publishers, then a school district asks the publisher for the accessible format, or do the districts work directly with NIMAC to obtain accessible curriculum?
I'm not sure if I caught all of that, but let me roll with it. Basically, in terms of the district, what we really want to have happen is for the districts to include that NIMAS language in their contracts. Then we will have the files available and in the NIMAC, and so those are going to be available to any accessible media producer that the district relies on. In some cases, as Liz mentioned earlier on, we do have some authorized users who are at the district level. Sometimes there are district transcribers. Those users can directly access the material, but those files are also available if you happen to have a district that you've got a student with a reading disability. They go to Bookshare for their materials. Bookshare can access those NIMAS files on behalf of the student in your district as well. And so basically that's the idea. The district is not going to have to, if you include that language in your contract, all things working as they should, there should not be any need for the district later on to be reaching out to the publisher to request the NIMAS. Does that answer that question?
I think it does, but if Joanne has any other follow-up. Oh, yep, she said thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking.
And I have another question then for the audience, considering what we've been hearing. Does your state provide guidance to the districts on the NIMAS procurement requirement in IDEA? And if you would let us know in the chat, yes, no, or whether you're unsure. Looks like we've got a mix of all answers with a decent amount of those who are unsure at this time. I like it. Unclear, but have plans to verify. So yeah, hopefully this question inspires you to find out and to share that information with the appropriate audiences.
And just to kind of chime in on that again, it's like if folks have thoughts on how we can help your state to get the word out, or we're very interested in strategizing around this. We know that it can be challenging, especially with states that have a large number of LEAs, and so we really want to try to provide the support that we can, and we'd be interested in talking with you offline about how we can help in that area.
Great. So Nicole or Liz, can you talk a little bit more about whether or not the NIMAC receives digital instructional materials? We've heard you mention print materials and that's the basis, the majority of the files that you do have in your repository. So what about the digital side?
Right, that is a really good question. Historically speaking, the NIMAC was a repository for hard copy printed textbooks. And this is, understandable when we think about IDEA 2004 and what K through 12 classrooms were looking like back when that legislation was written. There's language in the legislation that references printed textbooks and other printed materials. But we were really pleased in May of 2020, the Department of Education published a notice of interpretation that permitted for the first time the NIMAC to accept NIMAS for some digital instructional materials. One caveat with regard to this is that the NIMAS specification itself is designed to accommodate printed materials. And so in terms of the wide range of digital materials that are used in the classroom, there's only a subset of that you could actually turn into a NIMAS file set, right? And to kind of get a little bit more specific about that, what we're talking about is really materials that are composed primarily of static images and text, like printed books, and have a linear reading order and have minimal or no interactivity or audio-visual content. That kind of content and interactivity, it just can't be captured in the NIMAS format. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out. We also have a NIMAS and digital materials frequently asked questions on our website. But again, it's like we're pleased to be able to accept that subset of materials. But as we go on to the next slide, what we really kind of want to emphasize here is that as a part of that notice of interpretation, there was also a real built-in encouragement for publishers to provide accessible digital instructional materials right out of the box. On the one hand, the notice of interpretation provided flexibility for the NIMAC to accept certain digital materials, but at the same time, it also told publishers, if you make your materials meet a certain accessibility benchmark out of the box, they will be categorically exempt from NIMAS. Now, I will say that the provision in the notice is WCAG 2.0 AA. That's already been superseded. But the point really is just that what we really want to do is encourage that accessibility right out of the box for digital instructional materials. And this is certainly what the NIMAC really encourages for states and districts, kind of to harken back to how Jenna really framed the webinar at the very beginning. We're kind of coming full circle in terms of the way that really IDEA and NIMAS and ADA Title II can really dovetail and work in partnership to help provide access to the curriculum when NIMAS is required for those print-based materials, but accessibility is required as a part of the procurement for the digital educational materials.
All right. Are there any more questions? We did have a little bit going on in the chat about Title II and materials being required to be accessible from the beginning, and how the NIMAC does get some digital files. Any other questions? All right. So how can SEA and LEA staff learn more? Where can our audience members go for more information?
So for more information related to the NIMAC, we are really happy to talk with folks, to provide information. Our general email address is super easy to remember. It's nimac@aph.org. We also have an 800 number that we're generally, it's kind of an 8 to 4:30 Eastern time, but we do have voicemail, and we're always happy to take messages as well. But really encourage folks to reach out to us by email or phone. We also have a NIMAC informational website, nimac.us, which has a lot of resources for folks. If you haven't checked out that website, we invite you to take a look at those resources.
And to let you all know, you can also contact and connect with NCADEMI for broader digital technical assistance in the area of accessibility beyond NIMAS and NIMAC. We really are focused on helping schools and families improve the accessibility of digital educational materials and instruction from preschool through high school graduation. And you can view our website at ncademy.org, and you'll soon see that it's going to get a little facelift, and we'll be launching our brand new site in the next couple weeks at most. You too can email us at ncademy@usu.edu, or send us a text or leave us a voicemail at 435-554-8213. And we do share lots of our information on LinkedIn, so please follow us on LinkedIn. And last but not least, if you'd like to stay informed, you can sign up for our newsletter at ncademy.org/newsletter. And that newsletter is only quarterly, unless we have an event coming up, and then we'll share kind of a special bulletin about an upcoming event.
Jenna, I noticed that there is a question in the chat about EBRF or eBraille, and I'm so excited about it. So can I answer it?
Will you hang tight for one moment, and then we will
Sure.
we'll kick off the Q&A with that question.
Okay, sorry. I thought we were there.
Yeah,
My
we're
apologies.
basically there. We just wanted to mention, just in case somebody, you had to go early, please know that we do want your feedback at the link on the screen here. That's bit.ly/webinar-survey and the number 4. So this is an anonymous survey to let us know what you think about our content today and what we can do to improve our services, the NIMAC and NCADEMI. And it will take you less than 5 minutes. So please and thank you on that survey. And yes, we have just a few minutes for some questions, so we will move right into those. And Nicole, if you want to go ahead and answer that question about the EBRF file, please have at it.
Thanks. Yes, I wanted to just say that we are actually working very closely with software developers to ensure that NIMAS will be able to be used in the production of the new EBRF format. We're really excited about that. As a matter of fact, we are currently we've got Duxbury on board right now, the Daisy Pipeline and Braille Blaster, all on board for having the ability to produce eBraille using NIMAS as the source file format. So we're really excited about that, and we will be continuing to work closely with those guys as eBraille moves forward, or EBRF moves forward. So thank you for asking that question.
And a question we had in the Q&A, which goes back to an earlier section, Lauren noted that, so not just eligible under autism, so this goes back to that multiple disabilities discussion. but could they be eligible because of coexisting disabilities? And I talked a little bit about that yes, there could be a coexisting reading disability in addition to something like autism. But she's also wondering, what about ADHD or ADD? And I also noticed that somebody asked in the chat, what about students who are on 504s?
Okay, well, I will, to address the 504 issue, unfortunately, due to the language of the legislation itself, students must have an IEP in order to be NIMAS eligible. So that means that students who are served under 504 are not eligible for NIMAS source materials. In terms of other students, I think with the regard to the eligibility questions, what I would say is your best bet is to go back and actually look at the NLS guidelines. I will say that they are fairly broad in terms of who can be the certifying authority for a reading disability. In terms of the specifics on ADHD and those kinds of things, I'm not really an expert in terms of those kinds of determinations, but I will just say that um, in response to the Marrakesh Treaty Implementation Act, which made some changes to the language of the copyright exemption, the guidelines they're more expansive and they are more functional than they used to be. For example, the whole category of reading disability due to organic dysfunction, that went away entirely. And so, you know, I would just recommend kind of going back and looking at that and seeing what a specific student, what their situation is, whether or not that fits under the categories as they are currently defined by the NLS.
Nicole put a link in the chat to our NLS guidelines PowerPoint that kind of goes into greater detail on that. So if anyone wants more information, definitely check
Great,
that out.
thank you.
Yeah.
And I believe we've covered all of the questions, but if I've missed one in the chat, please speak up and let me know. All right, back over to you, Cynthia, right at 2:45.
Well, that was well done, team. Thank you so much to Liz and Nicole of the NIMAC and to Jenna, our technical assistant specialist at NCADEMI, who is leading and facilitating today's webinar. Please, for those of you who attended today, obviously between the NIMAC and NCADEMI, you continue to have support. So please reach out to us. This is very complex, and unfortunately, things that end up in statute tend to be more complicated, and we fall short of apologizing for that. We are here to deliver the information as it is and to help you work through it. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and don't get confused if who do I reach out to. Both the NIMAC and NCADEMI work really closely together. So reach out to either of us and we'll make sure that the right person gets back to you. Thank you, everyone. Have a terrific rest of your day. Don't forget to complete our evaluation survey and watch for the recording of this webinar to appear on the resources webpage where you collected the slide deck as part of the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.